In the shadowed halls of Latchwood Manor, a scream pierces the night, and Sir Reginald Haverford lies dead, a bloodied paperweight beside him. Who among the elegant guests, his grieving widow, the ambitious solicitor, the secretive niece, or the loyal butler, wields a hidden motive dark enough to kill? Enter Hercule Poirot, whose little grey cells unravel a web of lies, a priceless manuscript, and a secret that could destroy them all. What truth lies within the Codex Aureus, and who will fall when the final twist is revealed? Chapter 1. The Gathering at Latchwood Manor. The late summer sun cast a golden glow over Latchwood Manor, a sprawling Elizabethan estate nestled in the heart of the Devonshire countryside. Its ivy-clad walls and mullioned windows gleamed with an air of timeless dignity, though to the discerning eye there was a faint suggestion of decay, a cracked pane here, a sagging lintel there, that hinted at fortunes not quite as robust as they once were. The manor belonged to Sir Reginald Haverford, a baronet of considerable repute and diminishing wealth, whose annual summer gathering was a tradition upheld with the stubborn pride of a man who refused to let appearances slip. Captain Arthur Hastings, recently returned from a brief sojourn in London, stepped out of the chauffeured Rolls-Royce and adjusted his tie, feeling the familiar pang of anticipation that always accompanied a visit to Latchwood. He had been invited, somewhat unexpectedly, by Sir Reginald himself, who had penned a letter in his spidery hand, insisting that Hastings' presence would add a certain sparkle to the gathering. The invitation had intrigued Hastings, for Sir Reginald was not known for effusive warmth, and the promise of a weekend among a select group of guests had stirred his curiosity. The gravel drive crunched underfoot as Hastings made his way to the grand oak doors, where a butler, grey-haired, impeccably formal, and bearing the faintly harassed air of one managing a house under strain, greeted him with a bow. "Captain Hastings, sir. Welcome to Latchwood. Sir Reginald is in the drawing-room with the other guests." Inside, the manor was a study in contrasts, opulent yet faded, grand yet slightly worn. The air smelled of polished wood, old books, and the faint sweetness of roses from the gardens beyond. Hastings was led through a long gallery lined with portraits of stern-faced Haverfords, their eyes seeming to follow him with disapproval, and into the drawing-room, where the assembled company awaited. The room was alive with the hum of polite conversation, punctuated by the clink of teacups and the occasional ripple of laughter. Sir Reginald stood by the fireplace, a tall, gaunt man in his late 60s, with a hawkish nose and eyes that missed nothing. His wife, Lady Evelyn Haverford, sat nearby, her delicate features framed by a softened by time, still drew the eye. She smiled warmly at Hastings, though there was a flicker of something, nervousness perhaps, in her expression. "Captain Hastings!" Sir Reginald's voice boomed across the room. "Delighted you could join us. Come, let me introduce you to our little circle." The guests were an eclectic mix, each introduced with Sir Reginald's characteristic blend of pride and subtle condescension. There was Dr. Malcolm Price, a retired physician with a sharp wit, and the penchant for quoting Shakespeare. Mrs. Clara Winthrop, a widow of considerable wealth and a reputation for philanthropy, though her tight-lipped smile suggested a guarded nature, and Mr. Leonard Baxter, a young solicitor with slicked-back hair and an air of ambition that bordered on obsequiousness. Miss Violet Cresswell, a striking young woman with auburn hair and a quick laugh, was Sir Reginald's niece, recently returned from a tour of the continent. Finally, there was Major Ernest Fielding, a bluff military man with a ruddy complexion and a habit of drumming his fingers on any available surface. As Hastings shook hands and exchanged pleasantries, he could not help but notice the undercurrents of tension beneath the surface. Mrs. Winthrop's eyes darted toward Lady Evelyn with a hint of disapproval. Major Fielding's hearty laugh seemed forced, and Mr. Baxter, though polite, had a way of watching everyone as though calculating their worth. Only Miss Cresswell appeared genuinely at ease, though even she seemed to hesitate when Sir Reginald mentioned the family's recent financial difficulties. "Dinner will be served at 8, Sir Reginald announced, clapping his hands. "Until then, do make yourselves at home. The gardens are particularly fine this time of year." The company dispersed, some to the terrace, others to the library or billiard room. Hastings, ever observant, lingered by the window, watching as Lady Evelyn slipped away toward the rose garden, her steps quick and purposeful. He was about to follow when a familiar voice, precise and accented, broke into his thoughts. "Mon ami, you are deep in contemplation already. What is it that troubles the good Captain Hastings?" Hastings turned, a smile spreading across his face. There, standing in the doorway, was Hercule Poirot, his small, neat figure immaculate in a perfectly tailored suit, his patent leather shoes gleaming, and his moustache, oh, that moustache, waxed to perfection. His green eyes sparkled with amusement, but there was a sharpness to them that Hastings knew all too well. "Poirot!" Hastings exclaimed, striding forward to clasp his friend's hand. "What on earth are you doing here? I thought you were in London, buried in one of your little investigations." Poirot waved a hand dismissively. "You to this charming, but I suspect, rather troubled house?" Hastings recounted the invitation, and Poirot listened with his head tilted slightly, his fingers steepled before him. "Troubled, you say?" Poirot mused when Hastings had finished. "Oui, I feel it too. There is something in the air here, a tension, a secret that waits to be uncovered. Tell me, what do you make of our fellow guests?" Hastings hesitated, then offered his impressions. The guarded Mrs. Winthrop, the ambitious Baxter, the restless Major Fielding. Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "And Lady Evelyn? You have not mentioned her." "She seems anxious," Hastings admitted. "She slipped away just now, as though she didn't want to be seen." "Précisement," Poirot said softly. "The little details, Hastings. They are always the key. We shall observe, we shall listen, and we shall use the little grey cells. For I suspect, mon ami, that Latchwood Manor holds more than polite conversation and fine wine." As the afternoon waned, the guests reassembled for tea on the terrace. The conversation turned to Sir Reginald's collection of rare manuscripts, housed in a locked room off the library. "My pride and joy," Sir Reginald declared, his eyes gleaming. "Some of those volumes are worth a fortune, though I'd never part with them, of course." Mrs. Winthrop raised an eyebrow. "A fortune, you say? One wonders why you don't sell one or two, given the difficulties you've mentioned." Sir Reginald's face darkened, but before he could respond, Miss Cresswell laughed lightly. "Oh, Aunt Evelyn would never allow it. She says those books are the soul of Latchwood." Lady Evelyn smiled, but her hand trembled slightly as she set down her teacup. Poirot, seated beside Hastings, said nothing, but his eyes missed nothing. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn, a scream shattered the tranquility. It came from the direction of the library, sharp and piercing, followed by a heavy thud. The guests froze, teacups halfway to their lips, faces pale with shock. Hastings leapt to his feet, his heart pounding. Good Lord, what was that? Poirot rose more slowly, his expression calm but alert. "Come, Hastings," he said, his voice steady. "It seems our little holiday has taken a most interesting turn." They hurried toward the library, the other guests trailing behind. The heavy door stood ajar, and inside, sprawled across the floor beside a toppled chair, lay Sir Reginald Haverford. His eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, a thin trickle of blood seeping from a wound at his temple. A heavy brass paperweight lay nearby, stained with crimson. Lady Evelyn, standing in the doorway, swayed and clutched the frame for support. "Reginald," she gasped, her voice breaking. "Oh, the chair." Then he rose, dusting his hands with a handkerchief, and turned to the assembled guests, who stood in stunned silence. "Messieurs et mesdames," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "It appears we have a murder on our hands, and Hercule Poirot will not rest until the truth is revealed." The room seemed to hold its breath, and Hastings felt a chill run down his spine. Latchwood Manor, with its faded grandeur and hidden secrets, had just become the stage for one of Poirot's most perplexing cases. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Death. The library at Latchwood Manor was a cavern of shadows, its high shelves looming like silent sentinels over the grim scene. Sir Reginald Haverford lay motionless on the Persian rug, his lifeless eyes fixed on some unseen point beyond the ornate ceiling. The brass paperweight, its surface marred with blood, glinted dully in the lamplight, a mute witness to the violence that had shattered the evening's calm. The air was thick with the scent of old leather and the metallic tang of blood, and a heavy silence hung over the gathered guests, broken only by Lady Evelyn's stifled sobs. Captain Hastings stood near the door, his heart still racing from the shock of discovery. He glanced at Hercule Poirot, who was circling the body with the precision of a watchmaker, his small, neat figure moving with deliberate grace. Poirot's eyes, sharp and unyielding, took in every detail: the angle of the fallen chair, the position of Sir Reginald's outstretched hand, the faint smear of blood on the edge of the desk. He paused, his head tilted slightly, as though listening to a melody only he could hear. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Hastings, "observe the scene. What does it tell you?" Hastings hesitated, his mind grappling with the chaos of the moment. "Well," he began, "it looks like Sir Reginald was struck with the paperweight. The wound on his temple, it's deep, and the blood suggests it was recent. The chairs tipped over, so perhaps there was a struggle." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "A struggle, you say?" "Perhaps. But the chair, Hastings, it is not overturned in the manner of a violent tussle. It is too orderly, no? And the blood, regardez, it is confined to a small area. This was no frenzied attack. It was precise, calculated." Before Hastings could respond, Major Fielding's booming voice cut through the room. "Good God, man! Are you saying this was planned? Who would do such a thing to Sir Reginald?" Poirot turned, his gaze sweeping over the assembled guests, physician's instincts overriding his dismay as he checked for a pulse that was clearly absent. "Dr. Price," Poirot said, his tone courteous but firm, "you confirm, I presume, that Sir Reginald is dead?" Price looked up, his face grim. "Quite dead, I'm afraid. The blow to the temple was severe, likely instantaneous. He's been gone no more than half an hour, I'd wager." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Half an hour. And yet we were all together on the terrace for tea until moments ago. The scream, it came at precisely," he glanced at his pocket watch, 7:45. Who was not with us when the scream was heard?" A murmur rippled through the group, each guest glancing at the others, their faces a mixture of fear and calculation. Lady Evelyn spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. I was in the rose garden. I needed air. I heard the scream and came running." "And I was in the billiard room," Major Fielding said quickly, his ruddy cheeks flushing deeper. "Just having a quick game by myself. I heard the scream and dashed here." Mrs. Winthrop's eyes narrowed. "I was in the drawing room, looking over some of Sir Reginald's manuscripts. I came as soon as I heard." Miss Cresswell, her auburn hair catching the lamplight, added, "I was on the terrace, but I stepped inside to fetch my shawl. I was just coming back when I heard it." Mr. Baxter cleared his throat, his voice smooth but tinged with unease. "I was in the conservatory, checking some correspondence. The scream brought me here." Poirot listened, his expression unreadable. "And you, Dr. Price?" "I was in the library earlier reading," Price said, standing and brushing his knees. "But I stepped out to the terrace for tea. I was there when the scream came." Poirot's gaze lingered on each of them, as though peeling back the layers of their words. "Very well," he said at last. "We have a timeline, however incomplete. The police must be summoned, of course, but until they arrive, Hercule Poirot will take charge. This room must remain untouched. No one is to move anything, comprendre?" The butler, who had been hovering anxiously near the door, stepped forward. "I've telephoned the local constable, sir. He'll be here shortly, along with Inspector Grange from Exeter." "Bon," Poirot said, nodding. "Now, let us retire to the drawing room. This is no place for discussion." The guests filed out, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous hall. Hastings lingered, watching as Poirot made one final sweep of the library. He picked up a small, leather-bound notebook from the desk, its pages slightly crumpled, and tucked it into his pocket with a thoughtful frown. "Poirot, contradictions. The paperweight. It is too convenient, too obvious, and the notebook. It may hold secrets Sir Reginald did not wish to share." In the drawing room, the atmosphere was stifling despite the open windows. Lady Evelyn sat with her hands clasped tightly, her eyes red-rimmed. Miss Cresswell hovered protectively beside her, while Major Fielding paced, muttering about damned cowards who struck in the dark. Mrs. Winthrop sat apart, her posture rigid, as though distancing herself from the others' emotions. Baxter lit a cigarette, the smoke curling upward like a question mark, and Dr. Price leaned against the mantel, lost in thought. Poirot took his place at the center of the room, his small stature somehow commanding attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "a crime has been committed, and it is no accident. Sir Reginald was struck down with intent, and the one who did this is among us. I ask you to think carefully. What did you see, what did you hear in the moments before the scream?" A tense silence followed. Then Miss Cresswell spoke, her voice trembling slightly. I thought I saw someone moving near the library earlier, when I went for my shawl. Just a shadow, really, but it was quick, like they didn't want to be seen." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "A shadow, mademoiselle? And where was this shadow?" "Near the side door, the one that leads to the garden," she said. "I didn't think much of it at the time, but now—" "Interesting," Poirot murmured. "And you, Lady Evelyn? You were in the rose garden. Did you see anyone near the library?" Lady Evelyn hesitated, her fingers twisting the fabric of her dress. No, I didn't. It was getting dark and I was distracted. I only heard the scream." Poirot nodded, but his expression suggested he was not entirely satisfied. He turned to Major Fielding. "And you, Major? The billiard room is not far from the library. Did you hear anything before the scream?" Fielding stopped pacing, his brow furrowed. "Not a thing, Poirot. It was quiet as a tomb until that wretched scream." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Grange, a stocky man with a bristling moustache and a no-nonsense air. He surveyed the room, his eyes lingering on Poirot with a mix of respect and wariness. "Monsieur Poirot," he said,
I heard you were here. I suppose you've already started poking about. Poirot inclined his head. Merely observing, Inspector. The facts, they will speak for themselves, if we listen. Grange grunted, and set about organizing his men to secure the library. Poirot, meanwhile, drew Hastings aside. Mon ami, he whispered. Already I see the threads of this mystery. The alibis, they are too neat, too convenient, and the shadow Miss Cresswell saw, it is unease.
Latchwood Manor, with its creaking floors and watchful portraits, seemed to close in around them. Sir Reginald's death was no random act. It was the opening move in a deadly game, and Poirot, with his unerring logic, was already steps ahead. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The drawing-room at Latchwood Manor, though grand with its high ceilings and velvet drapes, felt oppressively close as the guests dispersed to their quarters under Inspector Granger's stern instructions. The weight of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder hung over the house like a storm cloud, and the flickering lamplight seemed to deepen the shadows rather than dispel them. Captain Hastings, lingering near the fireplace, watched as Hercule Poirot stood by a window, gazing out at the darkened gardens with an expression of serene concentration. To the untrained eye, Poirot might have appeared idle, but Hastings knew better. Those little grey cells were already at work, weaving the first threads of understanding from the chaos of the evening. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, keeping his voice low, "you seem remarkably calm. A man's been murdered, and we're surrounded by suspects. Yet you're staring at the roses as if you're on holiday." Poirot turned, his green eyes glinting with amusement. "Holiday, Hastings? No, no. The mind, it is never on holiday. The roses, they are beautiful, but they do not distract Hercule Poirot. They remind me that even in beauty there is purpose. Each petal, each thorn has its place. So too with this crime. Every detail, every word spoken tonight has its place in the puzzle." Hastings frowned, unconvinced. "But how did you even come to be here? You said Sir Reginald invited you, but why? He wasn't the sort to call in a detective without cause." Poirot's moustache twitched, and he drew the small leather-bound notebook from his pocket, the one he had taken from the library desk. "Sir Reginald wrote to me 3 days ago," he said, tapping the notebook lightly. "A letter, most discreet, requesting my presence at Latchwood. He spoke of a delicate matter, a concern about certain irregularities in his household. He did not elaborate, but he hinted at a fear, Hastings, a fear that someone close to him was not to be trusted." Hastings' eyes widened. "You think he suspected his own murderer?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone measured. "Or perhaps he saw something less defined, a shadow, like the one Mademoiselle Cresswell described. We shall see. For now, we must learn more about our cast of characters." The arrival of Inspector Grange interrupted their conversation. The inspector, his face etched with the weariness of a man accustomed to grim duties, approached Poirot with, "Like your thoughts, if you're willing. You've a reputation for seeing what others miss." Poirot inclined his head graciously. "I am at your service, Inspector. But first, let us establish the facts. Sir Reginald was struck with a paperweight at approximately 7:30, based on Dr. Price's estimation. The scream was heard at 7:45. This leaves a window of 15 minutes during which the crime was committed and the body discovered. Who, I ask, was alone during this time?" Grange consulted his notebook, his brow furrowed. "Lady Evelyn was in the rose garden, by her own account. Major Fielding claims he was in the billiard room. Mrs. Winthrop was in the drawing room, Miss Cresswell was fetching her shawl, Mr. Baxter was in the conservatory,
and Dr. Price was on the terrace with the others until the scream. The servants are being questioned now, but the butler insists they were all in the kitchen or servants' hall. Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled before him. And the side door to the garden near the library, has it been examined? Granger's eyes narrowed. Not yet, but I've got a man looking at it now. Why do you ask? A shadow? Poirot said simply. Mademoiselle Cresswell saw a shadow near that door. It may be nothing, or it may be everything. We must know if the door was locked, if it shows signs of forced entry, or if it was used to enter or exit the library unnoticed. Grange made a note, then gestured towards the hallway. I'm about to question the guests more formally. Care to join me, Monsieur Poirot? You might catch something I don't. Avec plaisir, Poirot replied, his voice smooth as silk. But I shall listen more than I speak, Inspector. The truth? It reveals itself in the silences between words. The questioning took place in the morning room, a smaller space with tall windows overlooking the lawn. The guests were summoned one by one, each entering with a mixture of apprehension and defiance. Hastings sat beside Poirot, his notebook open, scribbling observations as the interviews unfolded. First was Lady Evelyn, her delicate features drawn and pale. She sat with her hands clasped tightly, her eyes darting nervously towards the window. I don't know what more I can tell you, she said, her voice trembling. I was in the rose garden, alone. I often go there when I need to think. Reginald, he was under such strain lately, with the estate's finances. I thought a moment of quiet would help. Poirot's expression was gentle, almost paternal. And what troubled Sir Reginald, madame? You mentioned his strain. Was there something specific? Lady Evelyn hesitated, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. He never spoke of it directly.
Deceptively mild. Her eyes flickered toward the door, as though expecting someone to enter. Mrs. Winthrop. She's suggested it more than once. She thought it foolish to cling to old books when the estate was crumbling. Reginald was furious with her. Poirot nodded, making a mental note. Merci, madame. You have been most helpful. Next came Major Fielding, his bluster somewhat subdued by the gravity of the situation. I was in the billiard room, as I said, he declared, his hands clasped behind his back. I'm a man of routine, Poirot. A game before dinner helps me think. I didn't hear a thing until that scream. And you saw no one near the library? Poirot asked, his eyes fixed on Fielding's face. Not a soul, Fielding said firmly. The house was quiet. Too quiet, if you ask me. Mrs. Clara Winthrop was next, her posture rigid and her voice clipped. I was in the drawing room, looking at those manuscripts Sir Reginald was so obsessed with, she said. I find them fascinating, though I told him they'd be better sold to a collector than left to gather dust. Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly. And did Sir Reginald agree with your assessment, madame? Her lips tightened. He did not. He was sentimental about them. Foolishly so, in my opinion. Miss Violet Cresswell followed, her auburn hair catching the light as she sat. She seemed less nervous than the others, though her eyes were wide with concern. I only saw that shadow, she said, repeating her earlier statement. It was so quick I thought I imagined it. But it was near the side door, I'm sure of it. And what time was this, mademoiselle? Poirot pressed. Just before the scream, she said. Perhaps 7:40? Mr. Baxter was smooth and composed, his cigarette case gleaming in his hand. I was in the conservatory, writing a letter,
he said. "Business, you understand. I heard nothing until the scream." Finally, Dr. Price entered, his scholarly air tinged with unease. "I was on the terrace, as I told you," he said. "I saw Lady Evelyn in the garden, but no one else. The library was out of sight from where I stood." When the interviews concluded, Inspector Grange leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "A fine mess," he muttered. "Everyone's got an alibi, but they're all alone at the critical moment. Convenient, isn't it?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Too convenient, Inspector. The truth, it is not in their words, but in what they do not say. The shadow, the manuscripts, the financial strain, these are pieces of the puzzle, and incomplete.
And that, Hastings, is what intrigues me. Someone has removed pages, carefully, but not carefully enough. Tomorrow we shall dig deeper, and the little grey cells will find the truth." As Hastings left for his own room, the manor seemed to pulse with secrets, each creak of the floorboards a whisper of the crime that had shaken Latchwood to its core. Chapter 4. The Questions Begin. The morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Latchwood Manor, casting pale beams across the morning room, where Hercule Poirot sat, his posture impeccable, his hands folded neatly in his lap. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and toast, but the breakfast table was a somber affair, the guests' faces drawn with the weight of the previous night's tragedy. Sir Reginald Haverford's murder had transformed the manor from a place of genteel hospitality into a labyrinth of suspicion, and every glance, every murmured word, seemed laden with unspoken accusations. Captain Hastings, seated beside Poirot, sipped his coffee, his eyes darting between the guests. Lady Evelyn, pale and fragile, toyed with a piece of toast, her hands trembling slightly. Miss Violet Cresswell, her auburn hair pulled back in a simple chignon, attempted to maintain a semblance of cheerfulness, though her smiles were strained. Major Fielding, his military bearing intact, ate heartily but with a distracted air, his fingers drumming on the table. Mrs. Clara Winthrop sat apart, her sharp eyes observing everyone with a cold detachment, while Mr. Leonard Baxter, ever the polished solicitor, made polite conversation that felt oddly hollow. Dr. Malcolm Price, his scholarly demeanor subdued, kept his gaze fixed on his plate, as though avoiding the tension in the room. Poirot, however, was the picture of calm. His patent leather shoes gleamed, his moustache was waxed to perfection, and his green eyes sparkled with a quiet intensity. He had spent the early hours of the morning in the library with Inspector Grange, examining the scene of the crime, and now he was ready to begin his own investigation. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice cutting through the murmur of conversation, "I trust you have rested, though I imagine sleep was elusive. The events of last night demand answers, and Hercule Poirot intends to find them. I shall speak with each of you today, privately, to understand better the circumstances surrounding Sir Reginald's death." A ripple of unease passed through the group. Major Fielding cleared his throat. "Surely, Poirot, this is a matter for the police. Grange seems capable enough." Poirot inclined his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Inspector Grange is most competent, Major. But the police, they concern themselves with evidence."
Lady Evelyn's hand tightened around her napkin.
"What do you want to know, Monsieur Poirot? I've told you everything. I was in the rose garden when it happened."
"Oui, madame," Poirot said gently.
"And yet, the smallest detail, overlooked, may be the key. I shall begin with you, if you permit, in the study at 10 o'clock.
The interviews began promptly, conducted in the study, a small book-lined room with a single window overlooking the gravel drive. Poirot sat behind a mahogany desk, his notebook open, a fountain pen poised in his hand. Hastings stood by the window, ready to take notes, though he knew Poirot's memory was sharper than any pen. Lady Evelyn entered first, her steps hesitant. She sat, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes avoiding Poirot's gaze.
Monsieur Poirot, she began, I don't know what more I can tell you. Reginald's death, it's unthinkable.
Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but probing.
Madame, let us speak of Sir Reginald's state of mind. You mentioned his financial worries. Were there other concerns? A quarrel, perhaps, or a fear?
Lady Evelyn hesitated, the fingers twisting the lace of her sleeve.
He was distant lately, preoccupied. He spent hours in the library, poring over those manuscripts. He said they were his legacy, but I think he was afraid they'd be taken from him.
Taken? Poirot's eyebrows rose.
By whom? I don't know,
she said quickly, too quickly.
He never named anyone, but he was angry with Mrs. Winthrop for suggesting he sell them. And he mentioned something about a letter, a threat, but he wouldn't show it to me.
Poirot made a note, his expression unreadable.
A letter, madame. This is most interesting. And where might this letter be?
Lady Evelyn shook her head.
I don't know. He kept it in his desk, I think, but I never saw it.
Poirot nodded, dismissing her with a courteous smile. As she left, he turned to Hastings.
The letter, Hastings. It may be the same as the one Sir Reginald sent to me, or it may be something else entirely. We must find it.
Next came Major Fielding, his bluster tempered by unease. I've nothing to hide, Poirot, he said, sitting heavily. I was in the billiard room, as I told you. I didn't see or hear anything until that scream. Poirot's eyes narrowed.
And yet, Major, the billiard room is but a short distance from the library. You heard nothing? No footsteps? No voices?
Fielding's fingers drummed on his knee. Not a thing. The walls are thick, and I was focused on my game.
And your relationship with Sir Reginald?
Poirot asked.
You across the page. And did he take your advice? Fielding snorted. Reginald? Never. He said he'd rather die than part with them. The words hung in the air, and Hastings felt a chill. Poirot, however, merely nodded. Merci, Major. That will be all for now. Mrs. Clara Winthrop was next, her demeanour as cold and composed as ever. I was in the drawing room, as I said, she told Poirot, her voice sharp. I had no reason to be near the library. And yet, Poirot said, you took an interest in Sir Reginald's manuscripts. You suggested he sell them, no? Mrs. Winthrop's lips thinned. I did. It was practical advice. The estate is crumbling, and those books are worth a fortune. But Reginald was obstinate, sentimental. He accused me of meddling. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes piercing. And did you meddle, madame? Did you perhaps seek to persuade him more forcefully? Her eyes flashed with indignation. I resent the implication, Monsieur Poirot. I am a guest here, nothing more. Miss Violet Cresswell entered next, her youthful energy dimmed by the weight of the tragedy. I don't know what I can add, she said, her voice soft. I saw that shadow, as I told you. It was near the side door, just before the scream. Poirot's tone was gentle, encouraging. Describe this shadow, mademoiselle. Was it tall, short, male, female? Violet frowned, her brow furrowing. It was tall, I think. Quick-moving like they were in a hurry.
I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, it was too dark. And you were fetching your shawl, Poirot said. From where? My room, she said. Upstairs. I came down the back staircase, which passes near the side door. Poirot made a note, his expression thoughtful. Merci, mademoiselle, you have a keen eye. Mr. Leonard Baxter followed, his polished demeanor intact, but strained. I was in the conservatory, he said, lighting a cigarette with a practiced flick. Writing a letter to a client. I heard nothing until the scream. And your business with Sir Reginald? Poirot asked. You are a solicitor, oui? Did he consult you about his affairs? Baxter hesitated, exhaling a plume of smoke. He did, briefly. He was concerned about the estate's debts. He asked if I could arrange a loan, but I told him it would be difficult without selling assets. Such as the manuscripts, Poirot pressed. Baxter nodded. Exactly, but he wouldn't hear of it. Finally, Dr. Price entered, his scholarly air tinged with weariness. I was on the terrace, he said, repeating his earlier statement. I saw Lady Evelyn in the garden.
A snap. Hastings, he said. The picture begins to form. Each has a motive: money, resentment, fear. But the shadow, the letter, the manuscripts, these are the keys. We must search Sir Reginald's desk. They returned to the library, now guarded by a constable. Poirot examined the desk, its drawers locked, but yielding to a small key found in Sir Reginald's pocket. Inside, they found papers, ledgers, and a single sheet of stationery, crumpled and half hidden beneath a blotter. Poirot unfolded it, his eyes narrowing as he read. You will lose everything, he read aloud. Sell or suffer the consequences. No signature, Hastings. But the ink, the paper, it is recent. This is no idle threat. Hastings felt a surge of excitement. Then we're onto something, Poirot. This could point to the killer. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Perhaps, mon ami. But the truth, it is deeper than a single letter. The little gray cells, they tell me we have only begun to unravel the secrets of Latchwood Manor. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The morning at Latchwood Manor was cloaked in a gray mist that clung to the windows, as though the house itself were reluctant to reveal its secrets. The guests, confined to the manor by Inspector Grange's orders, moved about with a restless unease, their conversations stilted and their glances sharp with suspicion. The murder of Sir Reginald Haverford had cast a pall over the once elegant estate, and the presence of Hercule Poirot, with his piercing gaze and relentless curiosity, only heightened the tension. Captain Hastings, seated in the morning room with a cup of tepid tea, watched as Poirot paced slowly before the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. The little Belgian detective's movements were precise, almost balletic, and his expression was one of deep concentration. The threatening letter found in Sir Reginald's desk lay on the table before them, its stark words, "You will lose everything, sell or suffer the consequences," seeming to pulse with menace in the quiet room. "Poirot," Hastings ventured. "That letter points to someone who wanted those manuscripts sold. Mrs. Winthrop, perhaps. She was quite vocal about it." Poirot paused, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. "Mon ami, you leap to the obvious, as always. The letter, it is a clue, oui. But it is also a distraction. The killer wishes us to focus on the manuscripts, to suspect those who urged their sale. This is what we call a red herring, Hastings. A false trail, meant to mislead." Hastings frowned, setting down his cup.
Deeper. into the hearts and minds of those around us. Come, let us observe the guests this morning. Their behavior, it will tell us more than their words. The opportunity came at luncheon, served in the dining room under the watchful eye of the butler, who moved with the strained dignity of a man bearing the weight of a household in crisis. The guests were seated around the long mahogany table, their plates barely touched, despite the cook's efforts to maintain appearances with a spread of cold meats, salads, and delicate pastries. The atmosphere was heavy, punctuated only by the clink of cutlery and the occasional forced remark. Inspector Grange, who had joined them briefly, was quick to steer the conversation towards the investigation. "We've examined the side door near the library," he announced, his voice gruff. "No signs of forced entry, but it was unlocked. Anyone could have slipped in or out, and we found a partial footprint in the garden bed outside, men's size, but too smudged to identify." Major Fielding's face reddened, and he set down his fork with a clatter. "A footprint? You're saying the killer came from outside? That's nonsense. This is an inside job, Grange. One of us—" He stopped abruptly, his eyes darting around the table. Mrs. Winthrop's lips curled slightly. "Careful, Major. You'll have us all pointing fingers. Though I must say, your own absence from the terrace during the critical time is rather convenient." Fielding bristled. "I was in the billiard room, as I've said a dozen times. What about you, Mrs. Winthrop? Skulking about the drawing room, were you? Or perhaps you were near the library, eyeing those manuscripts you're so keen to see sold?" "Enough!" Lady Evelyn's voice, sharp and trembling, cut through the argument. "This is Reginald's house, and you're turning it into a circus of accusations. Have some respect." Poirot, who had been sipping his water with the air of a man enjoying a fine wine, set down his glass and spoke softly. "Madame, your grief does you credit. But the truth, it requires us to look closely at all possibilities. Major Fielding, you say you were in the billiard room. Yet I observed this morning that the billiard table is covered in a fine layer of dust, undisturbed. No game was played yesterday, I think." Fielding's face froze, his ruddy complexion paling. I meant I was setting up for a game. I didn't actually play." "Damn it, Poirot, are you accusing me?" "Not accusing, Major," Poirot said, his tone mild. "Merely observing. The truth, it is like a mosaic. Each piece must fit perfectly." The table fell silent, the guests exchanging uneasy glances. Miss Violet—
"Mademoiselle? But unlikely. The manor is remote, and the servants report no strangers seen on the grounds." "No. The answer lies within these walls. Tell me, did you see anything else when you saw that shadow near the side door?" Violet bit her lip, her brow furrowing. I'm not sure. It was so quick. But I think they were wearing something dark. A coat, maybe? I couldn't see their face." Poirot nodded, making a mental note. "Merci, mademoiselle. Every detail. It helps." As luncheon ended, Inspector Grange pulled Poirot aside. "That footprint's got me thinking," he said, lowering his voice. "It's near the side door, right where Miss Cresswell saw that shadow. I'm inclined to think Fielding's lying about the billiard room. He's got the build for it, tall, strong enough to wield that paperweight." Poirot's expression was enigmatic. "The footprint. It is interesting, Inspector. But consider this. A footprint in a garden bed is easily made, easily seen. It is too convenient, no? As for Major Fielding, his lie about the billiard room is curious, but it does not make him a murderer. We must look at all the pieces, not just the loudest." Grange grunted, unconvinced. "Well, I'm having my men search the guests' rooms this afternoon. If there's anything incriminating, blood, a weapon, that letter you mentioned, we'll find it." "Bon," Poirot said. "But I too shall search, in my own way. The mind, Inspector. It hides more than a room ever could." The afternoon was spent in a flurry of activity. Grange's men, with the butler's reluctant assistance, combed through the guests' quarters, finding little of note beyond personal effects and the usual clutter of a weekend stay. Poirot, meanwhile, requested access to Sir Reginald's private study, a small room adjacent to the library where he kept his most sensitive papers. With Hastings at his side, he examined the desk, the shelves, and a locked safe hidden behind a portrait of a stern-faced Haverford ancestor. The safe, opened with a key provided by Lady Evelyn, revealed a collection of documents: estate ledgers showing mounting debts, a will naming Lady Evelyn and Violet as primary beneficiaries, and a single page torn from a notebook, its edges ragged. Poirot held it up, his eyes narrowing. "Regardez, Hastings. This is from the same notebook we found in the library, but the writing, it is different." Hastings peered over his shoulder. The page contained a list of names: Mrs. Winthrop, Major Fielding, and Mr. Baxter, each followed by the cryptic notes. Winthrop, too persistent. Fielding, old grudge. Baxter, too clever. At the bottom was a single word, underlined: danger. "Good Lord, Poirot," Hastings said. Knew he was writing these things, and they did not wish them found. As they returned to the drawing room, the guests were reassembling, their faces tense. Grange entered, holding a pair of men's boots, their soles caked with mud. "Found these in Major Fielding's room," he announced, his tone triumphant. "The tread matches the footprint by the side door. Care to explain, Major?" Fielding's face turned scarlet. "Those are my boots, yes, but I wasn't in the garden. I told you, I was in the billiard room." "Which was covered in dust," Poirot interjected smoothly. "Major, your story, it does not hold. But fear not, Hercule Poirot does not jump to conclusions. The footprint, it is a clue, but it is not the truth." The room buzzed with whispers, and Hastings felt a surge of excitement. The net was tightening, but Poirot's calm assurance told him the real truth was still hidden, buried beneath layers of deception. As the guests dispersed, Poirot drew Hastings aside, his voice low. "The red herrings, they multiply, Hastings. The boots, the footprint, the letter, they point fingers, but they do not tell the story. We must look beyond, to the heart of Latchwood Manor." Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Latchwood Manor, casting long shadows across the polished floors. The house, once a haven of genteel hospitality, now felt like a chessboard where every move was calculated and every glance a potential checkmate. The discovery of Major Fielding's mud-caked boots had sent a ripple of suspicion through the guests, and the air was thick with unspoken accusations. Yet Hercule Poirot, seated in the morning room with a cup of tisane, remained unruffled, his green eyes bright with the quiet intensity of a man who saw more than he revealed. Captain Hastings, pacing restlessly, could not match his friend's calm. "Poirot," he said, stopping before the fireplace, "those boots are damning. Fielding lied about the billiard room, and now his boots match the footprint by the side door. Surely he's our man." Poirot sipped his tisane, his mustache twitching slightly. "Mon ami, you are too quick to seize the obvious. The boots, the footprint, they are clues, oui, but they are also distractions. The killer wishes us to focus on Major Fielding, to see him as the guilty party. But Hercule Poirot does not follow the path laid out by others. We must look for the detail that does not fit, the inconsistency that betrays the truth." Hastings frowned, unconvinced. "But what detail, Poirot? We've got alibis, motives, and now physical evidence. What are we missing?"
Poirot set down his cup, his movements deliberate. The little grey cells, Hastings, they see what the eyes do not. This morning, as I examined the library once more, I noticed something curious. Come, let us return to the scene of the crime.
Their way to the library, now guarded by a dour constable who nodded at Poirot's request for entry. The room was much as they had left it. Sir Reginald's body had been removed by the coroner, but the brass paperweight, cleaned of blood but still ominous, lay on the desk. The toppled chair had been righted, and the Persian rug bore a faint stain where Sir Reginald had fallen. Poirot moved to the desk, his eyes scanning every surface with meticulous care. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, pointing to a small ink bottle on the desk. "This bottle, it is nearly empty, yet the pen beside it is dry, unused. And yet Sir Reginald was writing, was he not? We found his notebook and the torn page in the safe, so why is the pen dry?" Hastings peered at the pen, a heavy fountain pen with a gold nib. "Perhaps he used another pen?" he suggested. Poirot shook his head. "Non, mon ami. The notebook, the letter, the page in the safe, all were written in the same ink, a distinctive blue-black. This is the only ink bottle in the room, and yet the pen is dry and the bottle is nearly empty. This is the inconsistency I seek." He moved to the bookshelf, running his fingers along the spines of Sir Reginald's prized manuscripts. "These books," he murmured, "they are the heart of this mystery, or so the killer wishes us to believe. But there is something else, something small." His fingers paused on a thin volume, a medieval manuscript with an ornate leather cover. He pulled it from the shelf, and as he did, a single sheet of paper slipped out, fluttering to the floor. Poirot retrieved it, his eyes narrowing as he read. "Mon Dieu," he said softly, "this is most illuminating." Hastings leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What is it, Poirot?" The paper was a receipt, dated 2 weeks prior, for the appraisal of a manuscript titled The Codex Aureus. It listed a value of £10,000, an enormous sum, and was signed by a London antiquarian named Mr. Percival Thorne. At the bottom, in Sir Reginald's spidery hand, was a note. "Refused offer, must protect." "Protect from whom?" Hastings asked, his voice hushed. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "That, Hastings, is the question. This receipt suggests Sir Reginald was considering the sale of a manuscript despite his protests. But he refused the offer. Why? Fear? Pride? Or something more personal?" They were interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Grange, his face grim. "Monsieur Poirot, we've found something else. In the conservatory, hidden behind some potted ferns, a handkerchief." The faint hum of insects.
The handkerchief lay on a table, its white linen marred by a rust-colored stain. Poirot bent over it, his magnifying glass in hand.
"Blood, oui," he said, "but also something else. A faint scent, like lavender. Curious, no? Mr. Baxter does not strike me as a man who favors lavender."
Grange frowned. "You think it's another plant, Poirot? Someone trying to frame Baxter?" Poirot straightened, tucking the handkerchief into an evidence envelope.
"I think, Inspector, that the killer is clever. They weave a web of clues, boots, footprints, handkerchiefs, to distract us from the truth. But the ink bottle, the receipt, these are the details that matter. They tell a story the killer did not intend."
Returning to the morning room, Poirot gathered the guests. his demeanor courteous, but commanding.
Mesdames et messieurs, he said, a new clue has emerged. A handkerchief, stained with blood, bearing the initial B. I ask you, does anyone recognize it?
The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Mr. Baxter's face paled, his cigarette trembling in his hand. I have several handkerchiefs, but none with blood. This is absurd. Lady Evelyn's eyes widened. I have a handkerchief with a B. My maiden name was Barrett, but I haven't used it in days. It's in my room, I'm sure. Poirot's gaze lingered on her. We shall verify, madame. But let us consider another detail. Sir Reginald was writing, perhaps moments before his death, yet his pen was dry. Does anyone know why? A heavy silence followed. Miss Cresswell spoke hesitantly. Uncle Reginald often used a quill for his manuscripts. He said it felt more authentic. There's one in the library, on the desk. Poirot's eyes lit up. Précisément, mademoiselle. The quill, where is it now? The guests looked blank, and Grange shook his head. No quill in the library, Poirot. We checked every inch. Then it is missing, Poirot said, his voice low. And that, my friends, is no accident. The quill, the ink, the receipt. They are threads in a tapestry of deception. Someone in this room knows more than they say. As the guests dispersed, their faces a mix of fear and defiance, Hastings followed Poirot to the terrace. That receipt, Poirot. It's a breakthrough, isn't it? Sir Reginald was hiding something about that manuscript. Poirot nodded, his eyes scanning the garden. Oui, Hastings, the Codex Aureus. It is worth a fortune, and Sir Reginald refused to sell.
The truth. We must watch, mon ami, and we must think.
As the mist thickened around Latchwood Manor, Hastings felt the weight of the mystery pressing down. The clues were mounting, but so were the questions. Poirot, however, seemed undaunted, his mind a beacon in the fog of deception, guiding them ever closer to the heart of the crime. Chapter 7. More Lies Surface. The atmosphere at Latchwood Manor grew heavier with each passing hour, as though the very walls were absorbing the weight of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder. The mist that had cloaked the estate in the morning had given way to a sullen drizzle, and the guests, confined indoors by both the weather and Inspector Grange's orders, moved through the grand rooms with the wariness of players in a deadly game. Suspicion hung in the air like the damp, and every creak of the floorboards seemed to carry a whisper of guilt. Hercule Poirot, seated in the drawing-room with a small leather-bound notebook in hand, was the picture of calm amid the storm. His patent leather shoes gleamed in the lamplight, and his moustache was as immaculate as ever, but his green eyes burned with a relentless intensity. Captain Hastings, standing by the window, watched the rain streak down the panes, his mind racing with the clues they had uncovered: the threatening letter, the missing quill, the blood-stained handkerchief, and the receipt for the Codex Aureus. Each piece seemed to point in a different direction, yet Poirot's serene confidence suggested he was beginning to see the pattern. "Poirot," Hastings said, turning from the window, "we've got a tangle of motives here. Money, grudges, those manuscripts, everyone seems to have a reason to want Sir Reginald out of the way. But that handkerchief with the B, it's got to be Baxter or Lady Evelyn, hasn't it?" Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on the notebook. "Mon ami, you are like a hound chasing a scent, but you must learn to pause and consider. The handkerchief, it is a clue, oui, but it is also a deception. The killer wishes us to focus on the obvious, on Mr. Baxter's initials or Lady Evelyn's maiden name, but the truth, it lies in the shadows, in the secrets that are not so easily seen." Before Hastings could respond, the door opened, and Miss Violet Cresswell entered. her auburn hair slightly disheveled, her eyes wide with agitation. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "I must speak with you. It's about Uncle Reginald. I've remembered something and I can't keep it to myself any longer." Poirot gestured to a chair, his expression one of gentle encouragement. "Sit, mademoiselle. Tell me what troubles you." Violet sat, her hands twisting in her lap. "It's about a conversation I overheard 2 days before it happened. Uncle Reginald was in the library, speaking with Major Fielding. They were
Heard Uncle say something about a debt. An old debt from their army days. He said, 'You'll not have it, Ernest. Not while I breathe.' And Major Fielding sounded furious. He said something about not being ruined again." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his fingers steepled before him. "An old debt, you say? Most interesting. And this was 2 days ago?" Violet nodded, her cheeks flushing. "Yes, Thursday evening. I didn't think much of it at the time. Uncle was always arguing with someone about money, but now, with what's happened—" "Merci, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. "You have done well to tell me. This debt, it may be a thread we must follow." As Violet left, her steps quick and nervous, Hastings turned to Poirot. "A debt from their army days. That's a motive, Poirot. Fielding's been lying about the billiard room. His boots match the footprint, and now this. He's looking guiltier by the minute." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, Hastings, but the guilty, they do not always shout their guilt so loudly. Let us speak with Major Fielding and see what he reveals." They found Fielding in the billiard room, leaning against the table, a glass of whiskey in his hand. His ruddy complexion was flushed, and his eyes were wary as Poirot and Hastings entered. "What now, Poirot?" he said, his voice gruff. "Come to accuse me again?" "Not accuse, Major," Poirot said, his tone mild. "Merely to understand. You and Sir Reginald, you served together, oui? There was a bond, but also, perhaps, a burden? A debt from long ago?" Fielding's hand tightened around his glass, and for a moment he seemed to struggle for words. "That's old history," he said at last. "Reginald and we had a falling out years back. A business venture gone wrong. I lost a good deal of money and he held it over me, but that was settled long ago." And yet... Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The rain had ceased at Latchwood Manor, leaving the air heavy with damp and the scent of wet earth. The grand house, with its ivy-clad walls and shadowed corridors, seemed to pulse with secrets, each room a stage for the unfolding drama of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder. The guests, confined by Inspector Granger's investigation and their own mutual suspicions, moved through the day with a strange politeness, their conversations laced with unease. Hercule Poirot, however, remained a beacon of calm, his meticulous mind sifting through the clues, the threatening letter, the missing quill, the blood-stained handkerchief, the receipt for the Codex Aureus, and now the revelation of Major Demeter, as though he sensed the investigation nearing a critical juncture. "Poirot," Hastings said, breaking the silence, "Fielding's admission about the debt. It's damning, isn't it? He had a grudge, his boots matched the footprint, and he lied about the billiard room. Surely we're close to cracking this." Poirot turned, his expression enigmatic. "Mon ami, you see the pieces, but not the pattern. Major Fielding's debt, it is a motive, oui, but it is also a distraction. The killer weaves a web of clues to keep us chasing shadows. We must look to the heart of this crime, not the loudest motive, but the quietest truth." Before Hastings could press further, a commotion erupted in the hall. Raised voices, sharp and anguished, drew them to the doorway.
There in the grand foyer stood Lady Evelyn Haverford, her delicate features contorted with grief and anger. She was facing Mrs. Clara Winthrop, whose usual composure had cracked, her eyes flashing with defiance. The other guests, Miss Violet Cresswell, Mr. Leonard Baxter, Major Fielding, and Dr. Malcolm Price, hovered nearby, their faces a mix of shock and curiosity. "You knew," Lady Evelyn cried, her voice trembling. "You knew how much those manuscripts meant to Reginald, and yet you hounded him to sell them. You drove him to this." Mrs. Winthrop's lips tightened, but her voice was cold. "Evelyn, you're hysterical. I suggested selling the manuscripts because it was sensible. Your husband was drowning in debt, and you know it. I was trying to help." "Help?" Lady Evelyn's laugh was bitter. "You call it help, to push him into a corner? He was terrified of losing everything. And now he's gone, and you stand there as if you're blameless." The outburst hung in the air, raw and electric. Violet rushed to her aunt's side, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "Aunt Evelyn, please, you mustn't upset yourself." But Lady Evelyn shook her off, her eyes brimming with tears. "No, Violet, I can't stay silent any longer. Reginald was afraid, and not just of losing the manuscripts. He told me someone was threatening him, someone in this house, and I didn't believe him." Her voice broke, and she sank onto a nearby chair, her hands covering her face. Poirot stepped forward, his presence commanding silence. "Madame," he said gently, "this is a moment of great pain, but also of great truth. You say Sir Reginald spoke of a threat. Can you tell us more? What did he fear?" Lady Evelyn's hands trembled as she lowered them, her eyes haunted. "He wouldn't say who," she whispered. "He said it was too dangerous, that I wouldn't understand. But he was obsessed with that Codex Aureus. He kept saying it was the key to everything, that it had to be protected at all costs. I thought he was being paranoid, but now I see he was right." Poirot's eyes narrowed.
Did he mention why it was so important? Beyond its value? She shook her head, her voice barely audible.
He only said it was more than money. It was a legacy, a secret. He wouldn't tell me more.
The guests exchanged uneasy glances, and Hastings felt a chill. The Codex Aureus again. Its shadow loomed over every clue, every motive. He glanced at Poirot, expecting a barrage of questions, but the detective's expression was one of quiet contemplation. "Merci, madame," Poirot said at last. "Your candor is most valuable. And now I think we must all reflect on what has been said. The truth, it is close, but it requires one more step." As Lady Evelyn was led away by Violet, the other guests dispersed, their faces etched with unease. Inspector Grange, who had been observing from the doorway, approached Poirot, his notebook in hand. "That was quite a scene, Poirot," he said. "Lady Evelyn's breaking like that, it's got to mean something. And this talk of threats? It's pointing back to those manuscripts." Poirot nodded, but his eyes were distant. "Oui, Inspector, but the manuscripts, they are a mask. The Codex Aureus is important, but not for the reasons we think. Lady Evelyn's words, they reveal a truth, but also a question. What was Sir Reginald protecting, and from whom?" Grange frowned. "You think she's holding something back?" "I think," Poirot said, "that grief has loosened her tongue, but fear still holds it. We must look closer, Inspector. The handkerchief, the quill, the receipt, these are not the heart of the matter. The heart lies in the secrets Sir Reginald kept, and in the one who knew them." That afternoon, Poirot requested access to Sir Reginald's private correspondence, which Lady Evelyn reluctantly provided. In the study, he and Hastings pored over letters, ledgers, and notes, searching for anything that might shed light on the Codex Aureus or the mysterious threat. Among the papers was a letter from Mr. Percival Thorne, the London antiquarian, dated a month prior. It was polite but insistent, urging Sir Reginald to reconsider the sale of the Codex Aureus and mentioning a private collector willing to pay handsomely. This collector, Hastings said. Could they be involved? If Sir Reginald refused to sell, maybe they took matters into their own hands. Poirot's fingers tapped the letter thoughtfully. Possible, mon ami, but unlikely. Latchwood is remote, and the crime is too personal, too intimate. No, the answer lies within this house, but this letter, it confirms Sir Reginald's fear. Someone was pressing him, and not just Mrs. Winthrop.
His death stood out.
Baxter knows too much. His questions about the Codex are not innocent. Must confront him.
Hastings' eyes widened.
Baxter again! First the handkerchief, now this. He's got to be our man, Poirot.
Poirot's smile was faint.
The diary. It points to Baxter, but it also points away. Why leave such a note unless Sir Reginald wanted it found? And why lock it away unless he feared discovery? The truth, Hastings, is not in the words, but in the intent.
That evening, as the guests gathered for a subdued dinner, Poirot's presence seemed to cast a spell over the room. Every gesture, every word was scrutinized, and the tension was palpable. Mrs. Winthrop, her composure restored, avoided Lady Evelyn's gaze. Baxter's usual polish was fraying, his cigarette case untouched. Fielding drank heavily, his eyes darting nervously. Only Violet and Dr. Price seemed relatively calm, though their silence spoke volumes. Poirot rose, his voice soft but commanding.
Mesdames et messieurs, tonight we have heard a truth born of grief. Sir Reginald feared a threat, and that threat cost him his life. But the Codex Aureus, it is more than a book. It is a secret, one that someone in this room knows. I ask you to think carefully, for Hercule Poirot is close to the truth.
As the guests retired, their faces pale, Hastings followed Poirot to the terrace.
That diary entry, Poirot, it's a bombshell. Baxter's in deep, isn't he?
Poirot gazed at the darkened garden, his voice low.
The diary. It is a clue, but also a trap. The killer wants us to look at Baxter, at Fielding, at the manuscripts. But the truth, mon ami, is in the silence, in what is not said. Tomorrow, we shall set a trap of our own.
The rain began again, a soft patter against the manor's ancient walls, and Hastings felt the weight of the mystery deepen. The truth, tantalizingly close, yet still shrouded in shadow. Chapter 9. The Trap. The evening at Latchwood Manor was cloaked in an oppressive stillness, broken only by the soft patter of rain against the windows. The grand house, with its creaking floors and watchful portraits, seemed to hold its breath, as though anticipating the next move in the deadly game that had begun with Sir Reginald Haverford's murder. The guests, their nerves frayed by days of suspicion and scrutiny, gathered in the drawing-room for an after-dinner coffee, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and defiance. Hercule Poirot, however, was the picture of composure, his small, neat figure radiating a quiet authority that commanded the room.
Pointing to Mr. Leonard Baxter, had woven a complex web, but Poirot's calm assurance suggested he was close to unraveling it. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, rising from his chair with a deliberate grace. Tonight, we stand at a crossroads in this investigation. A man has been murdered, and the truth, it hides among us, cloaked in lies and half-truths. But Hercule Poirot,
does not believe in coincidence, nor in luck. The truth, it is built on logic, on the little details that betray the guilty. And so, I propose a small experiment. The guests leaned forward, their eyes fixed on Poirot. Lady Evelyn, her delicate features pale, clutched her coffee cup tightly. Miss Violet Cresswell's auburn hair caught the lamplight, her expression one of nervous curiosity. Major Ernest Fielding, his ruddy cheeks flush from whiskey, gripped the arm of his chair. Mrs. Clara Winthrop's sharp eyes narrowed, her lips a thin line. Mr. Baxter, his usual polish fraying, lit a cigarette with a trembling hand, while Dr. Malcolm Price adjusted his glasses, his scholarly air tinged with unease. An experiment? Inspector Grange, standing by the door, raised an eyebrow. What are you playing at, Poirot? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Not a game, Inspector, but a method to provoke the truth. The killer, they are clever, yes, but they are not infallible. They have left clues, too many perhaps, in their desire to mislead. The boots, the handkerchief, the footprint, these are distractions. But there is one clue that cannot lie, the Codex Aureus. It is the heart of this mystery, and tonight we shall see who reaches for it. He paused, letting the words sink in, then continued. I have asked the butler to place the Codex Aureus in the library, on the desk where Sir Reginald was killed. It is there now, unguarded, save for the watchful eyes of Hercule Poirot. I invite you all to visit the library tonight to look upon this manuscript that meant so much to Sir Reginald, and I shall observe not just what you do, but what you do not do. A murmur of unease rippled through the room. Mrs. Winthrop's voice was sharp. This is absurd, Monsieur Poirot. Are you suggesting one of us will try to steal it? I suggest nothing, madame, Poirot said smoothly. I merely provide the opportunity. The guilty, they will reveal themselves, not by their actions alone, but by their fears. Hastings felt a thrill of excitement. A trap, Poirot, he whispered as the guests began to disperse, some to their rooms, others lingering with nervous glances. You're baiting the killer to make a move. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Prissy's anteroom off the library, hidden behind a heavy curtain that offered a clear view of the desk. The Codex Aureus, its leather cover gleaming in the lamplight, lay open on the desk, its illuminated pages a beacon in the darkened room. The library itself was silent, save for the occasional creak of the house settling, and the distant patter of rain. Hours ticked by, the grandfather clock in the hall chiming midnight, then 1 o'clock. Hastings, growing restless, whispered, What if no one comes, Poirot? What if the killer's too clever for this? Poirot's voice was low, steady. Patience, Hastings. The guilty, they are driven by fear, by greed, by the need to control. They will come, for they cannot help themselves. At 1:30, a faint sound broke the silence, a soft tread on the library floor. Hastings peered through a gap in the curtain, his heart pounding. A figure, cloaked in shadow, moved toward the desk. The lamplight caught a glint of auburn hair, Miss Violet Cresswell. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the Codex Aureus, her face pale and strained. Hastings tensed, ready to leap out, but Poirot's hand on his arm held him back. Wait, Poirot whispered. Observe. Violet's fingers brushed the manuscript, then withdrew as though burned. She turned, her eyes darting around the room, and then, with a stifled sob, she fled, leaving the codex untouched. Before Hastings could speak, another figure appeared, Mr. Baxter, his cigarette case glinting in his hand. He approached the desk, his movements swift and purposeful. He lifted the codex, flipping through its pages, his expression one of intense scrutiny. Then, with a muttered curse, he set it down and slipped out of the room. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Interesting, no? 2 visitors, 2 reactions, but neither took the manuscript. Why? Hastings shook his head, bewildered. Violet seemed afraid, but Baxter, he was looking for something specific. What's going on, Poirot? Before Poirot could answer, a third figure entered, Dr. Malcolm Price, his scholarly air replaced by a nervous intensity. He moved to the desk, his hands trembling as he opened the codex. Unlike Baxter, he lingered, his fingers tracing the illuminated text, as though searching for a hidden message. Then with a sigh he closed the book and left. His shoulders slumped. Poirot emerged from behind the curtain, his expression thoughtful. The trap, it has worked, Hastings. Not in the way I expected, but it has revealed much. Each came to the codex, but none took it. They seek something Sir Reginald hid, perhaps within its pages. Hastings followed Poirot to the desk, where the detective carefully examined the Codex Aureus. Its pages
Recently. And here, he pointed to a faint pencil mark in the margin, a series of numbers. 3, 14, 7. A code? Hastings asked, his voice hushed. Perhaps, Poirot said, or a reference. Sir Reginald was a man of secrets, and this manuscript, it holds more than art. We must study it further, but discreetly. As they returned to the anteroom, Inspector Grange appeared, his face grim. Poirot, my men saw movement in the library. Did you catch anyone? Poirot's smile was faint. I caught truths, Inspector. Miss Cresswell, Mr. Baxter, and Dr. Price all visited the Codex, but none took it. They seek something, but they fear to act. The killer is among them, and they grow nervous. Grange's eyes narrowed. You're saying the manuscript's the key, but why not steal it and be done with it? Because, Poirot said, the Codex is not the prize, it is the map. Sir Reginald hid something, and the killer knows it. Tomorrow we shall confront them all, and the truth will no longer hide. As the night deepened, Hastings felt the weight of the mystery pressing down. The trap had sprung, revealing not a thief, but a trio of suspects, each drawn to the Codex Aureus for reasons they dared not voice. Poirot's calm certainty was a beacon, but the shadows of Latchwood Manor seemed to grow darker, the truth tantalizingly close, yet still just out of reach. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The morning at Latchwood Manor dawned with a clarity that belied the storm of secrets brewing within its walls. The rain had cleared, leaving the air crisp and the gardens glistening with dew, but the atmosphere inside was charged with anticipation. Hercule Poirot had announced that he would gather the guests in the drawing-room at noon to reveal the truth behind Sir Reginald Haverford's murder, and the household buzzed with a mixture of dread and curiosity. The clues, the threatening letter, the missing quill, the blood-stained handkerchief, the receipt for the Codex Aureus, the diary entry, and the cryptic numbers found in the manuscript had woven a complex tapestry, and Poirot's serene confidence suggested he had finally unravelled its threads. Captain Hastings, seated beside Poirot in the drawing-room, felt his pulse quicken as the guests assembled. Lady Evelyn Haverford, her delicate features drawn with grief, sat with her hands clasped tightly. Miss Violet Cresswell, her auburn hair catching the sunlight, fidgeted nervously. Major Ernest Fielding, his ruddy complexion pale, gripped a glass of water as though it were a lifeline. Mrs. Clara Winthrop's sharp eyes darted around the room, her posture rigid. Mr. Leonard Baxter, his cigarette case untouched, sat with a forced calm, while Dr. Malcolm Price adjusted his glasses, his scholarly air tinged with unease. Inspector Grange stood by the door, his notebook open, his expression authority that belied his stature. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and precise. "We have gathered here to uncover the truth behind the murder of Sir Reginald Haverford.
A man has been taken from us, struck down in his own library, and the killer sits among us. But fear not. Hercule Poirot has used his little grey cells, and the truth it can no longer hide."
The guests leaned forward, their faces a mixture of apprehension and fascination. Hastings, his notebook open, felt a thrill of excitement. This was the moment Poirot's genius always shone brightest. "Let us begin with the facts," Poirot continued, pacing slowly before the fireplace. "Sir Reginald was killed by a blow to the temple with a brass paperweight between 7:30 and 7:45 in the evening. The scream, heard by all, came at 7:45, alerting us to the crime. Each of you was provided an alibi, yet each was alone during this critical time. The side door to the garden was unlocked. A footprint was found. A handkerchief stained with blood bore the initial B, and a threatening letter warned Sir Reginald to sell his manuscripts or lose everything. These clues, they point in many directions, no?" Major Fielding shifted uncomfortably. "Get to the point, Poirot. You've got us all on edge." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Patience, Major. The point it is this. The clues are a web of misdirection designed to confuse. The footprint, it matches your boots, but it is too convenient, too easily found. The handkerchief, it could belong to Mr. Baxter or Lady Evelyn, but its lavender scent suggests neither. The letter, it speaks of the manuscripts, but the Codex Aureus, it is more than a book. It is a secret, one Sir Reginald died to protect." He paused, letting the words settle, then held up the receipt for the Codex Aureus. "This manuscript, valued at £10,000, was the object of desire. Sir Reginald refused to sell despite offers from a London antiquarian, Mr. Percival Thorne. But why? Was it pride, sentiment, or something deeper? In the Codex we found a clue, a page marked with the numbers 3, 14, 7. These numbers, they are not random. They refer to a passage in the manuscript, a hidden annotation Sir Reginald made, revealing a secret he feared would destroy his family." Lady Evelyn gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. "What secret, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice was firm. "Patience, madame. Let us first consider the trap I set last night. I placed the Codex Aureus."
Guilt. Let us reconstruct the crime. Sir Reginald was in the library, writing in his notebook, when the killer entered through the side door. The blow was swift, precise, no struggle, no chaos. The killer then removed the quill he used, leaving the fountain pen dry to confuse the timeline. But they made a mistake. They left the Codex Aureus, and in it, the numbers 3-14-7. He turned to the group, his eyes sweeping over them. "These numbers point to a passage in the Codex, a note Sir Reginald wrote in invisible ink, revealed only under heat. I tested this myself this morning. The note reads, 'The truth lies with E. E, mes amis, is not Evelyn, but Ernest. Major Fielding.'" Fielding leapt to his feet, his face scarlet. "This is outrageous, Poirot. I told you, I was in the billiard room." Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "No, Major, you were not. The billiard table was covered in dust, undisturbed. But you were in the library. Were you not? You owed Sir Reginald a debt from your army days, a debt he refused to forgive. You argued with him 2 days before his death, and he wrote of your grudge in his diary. You knew the Codex Aureus held a secret, a document hidden in its binding, proving your involvement in a scandal years ago, one that would ruin you if exposed." Fielding's hands clenched, his voice shaking. "You've no proof, Poirot." "But I do. Poirot said, producing a small folded paper from his pocket. "This document, found in the Codex this morning, details a fraudulent deal you and Sir Reginald made during the war. He kept it as leverage, threatening to expose you unless you paid. You could not pay, so you killed him, staging the scene with the paperweight and planting your own boots to suggest an outside intruder. The handkerchief, you placed it to implicate Mr. Baxter, knowing his initials matched." The room was silent, the guests frozen. Lady Evelyn's eyes widened, and Violet clutched her arm. Baxter's cigarette fell to the floor, forgotten. Price's glasses slipped down his nose, and Mrs. Winthrop's lips parted in shock. Fielding's face crumpled, his shoulders sagging. I didn't mean to kill him," he muttered, his voice breaking. "He was going to ruin me, Poirot. That document, it would have destroyed my reputation, my life. I went to reason with him, but he laughed, said I'd never be free. I grabbed the paperweight in a moment of rage." Poirot's expression was stern, but not unkind. "The rage, Major. It is no excuse. You took a life, and you sought to deceive. But the little grey cells, they see through deception." Inspector Grange stepped forward, his face grim. "Major Fielding, you're under arrest for the murder of Sir Reginald Haverford." As Fielding was led away, his head bowed, the room exhaled a collective,
But she said nothing. Price murmured something about justice, his voice hollow. Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice low. "You did it, Poirot. The numbers, the invisible ink. How did you know?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The little grey cells, mon ami. They see the pattern where others see chaos. The Codex Aureus was not the motive, but the key to the motive. Sir Reginald's secret was his power, and Major Fielding could not bear its weight." As the guests dispersed, the weight of the revelation hung heavy in the air. Latchwood Manor, its secrets laid bare, seemed to sigh in relief. But Hastings knew the scars of this tragedy would linger long after Poirot's departure. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The drawing room at Latchwood Manor, once a stage for polite conversation and genteel gatherings, now bore the weight of a grim resolution. The revelation of Major Ernest Fielding's guilt in the murder of Sir Reginald Haverford had left the guests in a state of stunned silence, their faces reflecting a mix of relief, sorrow, and lingering unease. The rain had returned, a soft drizzle pattering against the windows, as though the manor itself wept for the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. Hercule Poirot, his small figure framed by the flickering firelight, stood before the assembled company, his green eyes thoughtful, his moustache immaculate despite the gravity of the moment. Captain Hastings, seated near the window, felt a curious mixture of triumph and melancholy. Poirot's brilliance had once again unravelled a tangled web of deception, but the cost, a life lost, a family shattered, cast a shadow over the victory. He glanced at his friend, expecting the usual air of satisfaction, but Poirot's expression was one of quiet contemplation, as though the case were not yet fully closed in his mind. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice soft but carrying the weight of authority, "the truth has been revealed, and justice it will take its course. Major Fielding has confessed to the murder of Sir Reginald Haverford, driven by fear of a secret that would have destroyed him. The Codex Aureus, with its hidden document and cryptic numbers, was the key to his motive, and the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot have brought it to light. But now, we must reflect, not only on the crime, but on the human heart that led to it." Lady Evelyn, her eyes red-rimmed, looked up from her chair, where she sat with Violet's hand clasped in hers. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "you've given us the truth, but it brings no comfort. Reginald is gone, and I failed to see his fear, his pain. How could I have been so blind?" Poirot's gaze softened, his tone almost paternal.
Clung to the Codex Aureus, not for its value, but for what it represented. His pride, his past. And that pride, it invited danger. Miss Violet Cresswell, her auburn hair catching the firelight, spoke hesitantly. But why didn't he tell us? If he was afraid, if he knew someone was threatening him, why keep it secret? Poirot turned to her, his eyes gleaming with understanding. Mademoiselle, secrets are a burden, but also a shield. Sir Reginald believed he could control the danger, that his silence would protect those he loved, but in doing so, he underestimated his enemy. Major Fielding, he was not a villain in the common sense. He was a man driven to desperation by a past he could not escape. And desperation, it is the spark that ignites tragedy. Mrs. Clara Winthrop, her sharp features softened by the weight of the moment, spoke up, her voice unusually subdued. I urged him to sell those manuscripts, Monsieur Poirot. I thought it was practical, sensible. Did I push him towards this? Poirot shook his head. No, madame. Your advice, it was pragmatic, but it was not the cause. The cause lies deeper, in the choices of men who carry old wounds. You, like the others, were part of the tapestry, but not the hand that wove it. Mr. Leonard Baxter, his cigarette case untouched for once, leaned forward, his voice low. And the Codex? What happens to it now? It's caused enough trouble. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. The Codex Aureus, it will remain with the Haverford family, as Sir Reginald wished. Its secret, the document hidden within, has been destroyed, for it served its purpose in revealing the truth. Let it now be a treasure, not a curse. Dr. Malcolm Price, adjusting his glasses, nodded thoughtfully. You've done a remarkable thing, Poirot. But I can't help wondering, how did you know the numbers 3-14-7 were a code, and that the invisible ink would reveal the truth? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The little grey cells, Doctor. They see the pattern where others see chaos. The numbers, they were too precise to be random. And the quill, missing from the scene, suggested Sir Reginald wrote something he wished to hide. Invisible ink. It is an old trick, but effective. A simple test with heat, and the message was revealed. From there, it was a matter of understanding the human heart, its fears, its desires, its capacity for deception. Inspector Grange, standing by the door, cleared his throat. You've outdone yourself, Poirot. I'll admit I was focused on the boots and the handkerchief, but you saw through it all. Fielding's being taken to Exeter now. It followed Poirot to the terrace, where the air was fresh with the scent of rain-soaked roses. The manor loomed behind them, its ancient walls seeming to sigh with relief, yet still burdened by the weight of its history. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice low, you've solved it, but you seem unsettled. Is there something more? Poirot gazed at the garden, his expression pensive. Mon ami, every case it leaves a mark. The truth, it is satisfying, but it is also a mirror. It shows us the frailty of men, the pride of Sir Reginald, the desperation of Major Fielding, the silence of those who saw but did not speak. I reflect, Hastings, because to solve a crime is not to erase its pain. It is to understand it, to learn from it. Hastings nodded, struck by the depth of Poirot's words. And now, what's next for you? Poirot's smile returned, a glint of mischief in his eyes. Next, mon ami, I return to London, to my little flat, my tisane, my order and method. But first, I shall enjoy one more day in this countryside, to remind myself that even in chaos,
there is beauty. He turned, his steps light, and headed toward the manor's entrance, where a car waited to take them to the station. Hastings followed, his heart lighter, but his mind still turning over the case. Latchwood Manor, with its faded grandeur and hidden secrets, would remain etched in his memory, a testament to the brilliance of Hercule Poirot and the fragile, flawed humanity he sought to understand. As they reached the car, Poirot paused, glancing back at the manor. "Adieu, Latchwood," he murmured. "Your secrets are safe, but your lessons, they will linger." The car door closed, and as they drove away, the manor faded into the mist, a silent witness to a tragedy resolved, but never forgotten. Chapter 12. The Unseen Thread. The departure of Major Ernest Fielding, now in custody and en route to Exeter, had left Latchwood Manor steeped in a fragile calm, like the hush after a storm. The drizzle had ceased, and the late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the estate, illuminating the ivy-clad walls and the manicured gardens. Yet, beneath this serene facade, an undercurrent of unease lingered among the guests. Hercule Poirot's revelation had solved the murder of Sir Reginald Haverford, but Captain Hastings, walking the gravel path beside his friend, sensed that Poirot's mind was not entirely at rest. "Poirot," Hastings said, adjusting his hat against the evening breeze, "you've done it again. Cracked the case with those little grey cells of yours. Fielding's confession, the hidden document in the Codex Aureus,
Reginald to protect a secret that would have ruined him. The clues, the footprint, the handkerchief, the receipt, the numbers 3, 14, 7, they led us to the truth. But there is a thread, Hastings, an unseen thread that tugs at the mind of Hercule Poirot. Something does not fit, and I cannot ignore it." Hastings frowned. His curiosity piqued. "What do you mean? Fielding confessed. The document in the Codex proved his motive. What's left to question?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "The confession, it is too complete, too perfect. Major Fielding, he is a man of pride, of bluster, yet he crumbled so quickly when confronted. And the Codex Aureus, why leave it untouched, when its secret was his undoing? There is a shadow behind this crime, Hastings, a shadow I have not yet seen clearly." They continued their walk, circling the rose garden where Lady Evelyn had been on the night of the murder. The roses, vibrant despite the recent rain, seemed to nod in silent agreement with Poirot's unease. As they approached the side door near the library, the door through which the killer had likely entered, Poirot stopped, his eyes narrowing as he examined the ground. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, pointing to a patch of earth near the door. "The footprint. It was here, matching Major Fielding's boots. Yet the earth, it is soft, easily disturbed. A clever person could have placed those boots to create a false trail." Hastings' eyes widened. "You're saying someone framed Fielding? But he confessed, Poirot. Why would he do that if he wasn't guilty?" Poirot's gaze was distant, his fingers steepled before him. "There are many reasons a man might confess, mon ami. Fear, guilt, or to protect another. The little grey cells, they tell me there's more to this story. Let us return to the library. There is one detail I must verify." The library, now free of the constable's guard, was a quiet sanctuary of books and shadows. The desk where Sir Reginald had been struck still bore the faint stain of blood, though the brass paperweight had been removed as evidence. Poirot moved to the bookshelf, his fingers brushing the spine of the Codex Aureus. He opened it carefully, turning to the page marked with the numbers 3, 14, 7. The faint pencil mark remained, but the invisible ink message, revealed by heat, was no longer needed. The documented reference had been found and destroyed. Poirot's eyes scanned the page, then paused on a small,
almost imperceptible tear at the edge. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "This tear, it is new. Someone has handled this page since last night, after our trap." Hastings leaned closer, his heart racing. But who, Poirot? Everyone was under watch after Fielding's arrest. Drama. He closed the codex and turned, his expression one of sudden clarity. "Come, mon ami. We must speak with the butler, Mr. Grayson. He has been present at every turn, yet his voice is silent. It is not natural." They found Grayson in the servants' hall, polishing silver with a meticulous care that mirrored Poirot's own. The butler, grey-haired and stoic, looked up with a polite nod. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, how may I serve you?" Poirot's gaze was piercing, his voice soft but unrelenting. "Monsieur Grayson, you have been most helpful in this investigation. Yet you have said little of your own movements on the night of Sir Reginald's death. You were in the kitchen, oui, with the other servants?" Grayson's hands paused, his expression unreadable. "Yes, sir. I was overseeing the preparations for dinner. I heard the scream and came at once." "And before the scream?" Poirot pressed. "You were not near the library, perhaps? Near the side door, where a shadow was seen?" Grayson's eyes flickered, a brief crack in his composure. "No, sir. I was in the kitchen, as I said." Poirot's smile was faint, almost dangerous. "And yet, monsieur, I have learned that you were seen leaving the library earlier that evening, before the guests gathered for tea. A maid, she mentioned this in passing to Inspector Grange, though she thought it unimportant. And your shoes, Monsieur Grayson, they are polished, but they are the same size as the footprint found by the side door." Grayson's face paled, his hands trembling slightly. I was in the library briefly to deliver a message to Sir Reginald. It was nothing unusual." Poirot stepped closer, his voice low and insistent. "A message or a motive? Sir Reginald, he trusted you, did he not? You knew of the Codex Aureus, of its value, of the document hidden within. You knew, too, of Major Fielding's debt, for Sir Reginald confided in you, as he did in no one else. Did you see an opportunity, Monsieur Grayson, to secure your own future by ensuring that document never saw the light of day?" Grayson's composure shattered, his voice rising in a rare display of emotion. "You don't understand, Monsieur Poirot. I served Sir Reginald for 30 years. I knew his secrets, yes, but I was loyal. I would never kill?" Poirot interrupted, his tone cutting. "Or never let a secret destroy the man you served? The document in the Codex, it gasped, his mind reeling.
"Good Lord, Poirot! Fielding's confession, it was to protect Grayson?" Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving the butler. Hastings, Major Fielding, he knew Grayson's role in the scandal and took the blame, perhaps out of loyalty, perhaps out of guilt. But the truth, it cannot be hidden from Hercule Poirot."
Inspector Grange was summoned, and Grayson was taken into custody, his head bowed in defeat. As the guests were informed, their shock was palpable. Lady Evelyn wept, Violet clung to her, and the others murmured in disbelief. The unseen thread, as Poirot had called it, had been pulled, revealing a truth even darker than they had imagined. As evening fell, Poirot and Hastings stood on the terrace, the manor's lights glowing softly behind them.
"You saw it all, Poirot.
Hastings said, his voice hushed with admiration. The tear in the page, Grayson's silence, how did you know? Poirot's smile was wistful. The little grey cells, mon ami. They see the unseen, the quiet moments that shout the loudest. Grayson was too perfect, too invisible. And the codex, it was touched too recently to be coincidence. The truth, it is always there, waiting for those who listen. As they prepared to leave Latchwood, the manor seemed to exhale, its secrets laid bare. But Hastings knew the scars of this case would linger, a reminder of the fragile line between loyalty and betrayal. Chapter 13. The Hidden Motive. The revelation of Mr. Grayson's guilt had sent shockwaves through Latchwood Manor, transforming the once stately home into a place of raw, unspoken grief. The evening light bathed the estate in a soft amber glow, but the warmth of the setting sun did little to dispel the chill that lingered in the hearts of its occupants. The guests, now gathered in the drawing-room, sat in a heavy silence, their faces reflecting a mix of disbelief and exhaustion. Hercule Poirot, his small figure standing by the fireplace, seemed almost a statue of calm amidst the storm, his green eyes sharp with a lingering question that Captain Hastings could sense, but not yet name. Hastings, seated near the window, watched his friend with a growing sense of unease. The case had been solved. Grayson's confession, spurred by Poirot's relentless pursuit of the truth, had tied up the loose ends. The butler's role in the wartime scandal, his desperate act to protect his secret, and the planted clues to frame Major Fielding. Yet Poirot's demeanor suggested there was more to uncover, a hidden motive that lay just beyond the surface of the butler's admission.
Poirot is complete, oui, but it is too neat. Grayson, he is a man of loyalty, of service. To kill his master of 30 years, it requires more than fear of exposure. There is a motive, Hastings, a deeper truth that drives such a betrayal. The little grey cells, they whisper that we have seen the act, but not the heart. Before Hastings could press further, Lady Evelyn rose from her chair, her delicate frame trembling with emotion. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft but resolute, "you've given us the truth about Reginald's death, but I cannot understand it. Grayson, he was like family. Why would he do this? What drove him to such a terrible act?" Poirot turned to her, his expression one of gentle compassion. "Madame, the heart, it is a complex thing. Grayson served your husband faithfully, but loyalty, it can become a chain. Let us consider the facts once more, but this time we shall look beyond the surface." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his voice measured. Grayson admitted to striking Sir Reginald with the paperweight, driven by fear of a document hidden in the Codex Aureus, a document that implicated him in a wartime scandal alongside Major Fielding. He planted clues, the boots, the handkerchief, to mislead us. But why, I ask, did he not destroy the document himself? The codex was in the library, accessible to him. Why kill when silence could have been secured another way. The guests leaned forward, their eyes fixed on Poirot. Miss Violet Cresswell, her auburn hair catching the firelight, spoke hesitantly. "You're saying there's more to it? Something else drove him?" Poirot nodded. "Précisément, mademoiselle. Grayson's confession, it explains the act, but not the passion. To kill a master he served for decades, there must be a wound deeper than fear of ruin. And so, I have looked again at the diary, the letters, the codex itself. There is a clue, mes amis, that we have overlooked. A letter, not the threatening one, but another found among Sir Reginald's private papers this afternoon." He produced a folded sheet, its edges worn, and held it up. "This letter, it is from Sir Reginald to Grayson, written a week before the murder.
Future. Mr. Leonard Baxter, his cigarette case untouched, spoke up, his voice strained.
So Grayson killed because he felt betrayed. That's monstrous.
Poirot's eyes gleamed. Monstrous, perhaps, but human. The heart, it does not act on logic alone. Grayson, he was a man cornered. By his past, by his master's distrust, by fear of a life without purpose. He struck in a moment of despair, then wove a web of clues to protect himself. Dr. Malcolm Price adjusted his glasses, his scholarly air subdued.
And Major Fielding? Why did he confess? If Grayson was the true killer.
Poirot's smile was faint. Major Fielding, he is a man of honor, despite his flaws. He knew of Grayson's role in the scandal, for they were bound by it. When I confronted him, he saw a chance to shield Grayson, perhaps out of guilt for their shared past. His confession was a sacrifice, but it could not hide the truth from Hercule Poirot. Mrs. Clara Winthrop, her sharp features softened by the weight of the revelation, spoke quietly. So it was all about betrayal. Reginald's distrust, Grayson's rage, Fielding's loyalty. What a tragic mess. Tragic, oui, Poirot said, but also illuminating. The human heart, it is a maze of motives, of passions. To solve a crime, we must navigate that maze, not merely follow the clues. Inspector Grange, standing by the door, nodded grudgingly.
You've outdone yourself again, Poirot. I was ready to close the case with Fielding, but you saw the deeper truth. Grayson's being questioned now. He'll face the consequences.
Poirot inclined his head. Justice, Inspector, is the foundation of order. But understanding, it is the path to peace. We have found both, I think.
As the guests dispersed, their footsteps heavy with the weight of the truth, Hastings followed Poirot to the terrace, where the evening air was cool and fragrant with roses. You saw it all, Poirot, Hastings said, his voice hushed with admiration. The letter, Grayson's motive. How did you know to look deeper? Poirot gazed at the darkening garden, his expression pensive.
The little grey cells, mon ami, they see the human heart, where the clues are but shadows. Grayson's silence, it was too perfect, too controlled. And the letter, it spoke of a wound deeper than fear. The truth, it is always there, waiting. Fragile, flawed humanity that Poirot understood so well.
Chapter 14. The Echoes of Truth. The morning sun rose over Latchwood Manor, its golden rays piercing the lingering mist and bathing the estate in a soft, forgiving light. The grandeur of the Elizabethan house, with its ivy-clad walls and ancient oaks, seemed to reclaim a measure of its dignity after the tumultuous revelations of the past days. Yet, the scars of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder and the betrayal of his trusted butler, Mr. Grayson, lingered in the air, a quiet reminder of the fragility of trust. The guests, preparing to depart, moved through the halls with subdued steps, their voices hushed as if reluctant to disturb the manor's newfound peace. Hercule Poirot, his small, neat figure immaculate in a tailored suit, stood in the library, his hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the scene of the crime one final time. The desk, now cleared of the blood-stained paperweight, stood as a silent witness to the tragedy, while the Codex Aureus, safely returned to its shelf, gleamed with an air of solemn importance. Captain Hastings, standing by the window, watched his friend with a mix of admiration and curiosity, sensing that Poirot's mind was still turning over the case, even as its conclusion had been reached. "Poirot," Hastings said, breaking the silence, "you've done it again, unravelled a mystery that seemed impenetrable. Grayson's confession, the hidden letter, the truth about the Codex, it's all so perfectly clear now. Yet you seem restless. Is there something you're not telling me?" Poirot turned, his green eyes gleaming with a thoughtful intensity. "Mon ami, you are perceptive as always. The case, it is solved, oui. Grayson killed Sir Reginald, driven by the wound of a master's distrust and the fear of a ruined future. The clues, the torn page, the missing quill, the planted boots, they led us to the truth. But there is an echo, Hastings, a resonance of human nature that lingers. The heart, it does not rest easily, even when justice is served." Hastings frowned, adjusting his tie. "An echo? You mean there's more to the story? Another accomplice, perhaps?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "No, not an accomplice. The truth, it is complete, but its ripples, they touch others. The guests, they carry their own secrets, their own burdens, and these too have shaped the tragedy. Come, let us walk the grounds one last time. The air, it clears the mind." They stepped out into the garden, where the roses, still damp from the previous night's rain, perfumed the air with a delicate sweetness. The gravel path
Beautiful, but it has thorns. So too with Latchwood Manor. Its beauty hides pain. Lady Evelyn, she grieves, but she also carries guilt, for she saw her husband's fear and did not act. Miss Cresswell, her youth is shadowed by the loss of her uncle, and the others, Mrs. Winthrop, Mr. Baxter, Dr. Price. They too are marked by this tragedy, each in their own way. Hastings nodded, his thoughts turning to the guests. They're all affected, aren't they? Mrs. Winthrop's insistence on selling the manuscripts, Baxter's questions about the Codex, Price's curiosity. It all played a part, even if they didn't know it. Précisément, Poirot said. The crime, it is not just the act of murder, but the web of human desires that surrounds it. Mrs. Winthrop, she sought to save the estate, but her pragmatism wounded Sir Reginald's pride. Mr. Baxter, his ambition led him to probe too deeply, stirring Grayson's fears. Dr. Price, his scholarly interest in the Codex made him a threat in Sir Reginald's eyes. Each, in their way, contributed to the tension that led to Grayson's desperate act. They continued their walk, passing the side door where the fateful footprint had been found. Poirot stopped, his eyes narrowing as he examined the ground, now smoothed by the gardener's rake. "This door," he murmured,
It was the path to betrayal. Grayson, he entered here, his heart heavy with 30 years of loyalty turned to ash. But the footprint, it was too perfect, too deliberate. Even in his confession, Grayson did not mention it. This, Hastings, is the echo I hear, a detail that does not sing in harmony with the rest. Hastings' eyes widened. You think someone else placed the footprint? But why, if Grayson's guilty? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Not to frame Grayson, mon ami, but to confuse. Someone else knew of the crime or suspected it, and sought to muddy the waters. I suspect Miss Cresswell, with her keen eyes and her shadow by the door. She saw something that night, more than she has admitted. But her silence, it is not malice, it is fear. Perhaps for her aunt, for the family's name. They returned to the drawing room, where the guests were gathered, their bags packed and their expressions weary. Lady Evelyn, her silver hair neatly arranged, approached Poirot, her eyes filled with gratitude and sorrow. Monsieur Poirot, she said, you've given us the truth, painful as it is. I don't know how to thank you. Latchwood will never be the same, but at least we can begin to heal. Poirot inclined his head, his tone gentle. Madame, the truth, it is a bitter medicine, but it cleanses. You and Mademoiselle Cresswell, you will carry the legacy of Latchwood forward. The Codex Aureus, it remains yours. Door, just before the scream. I didn't want to believe it, so I said nothing. I'm sorry. Poirot's gaze softened. Mademoiselle, your silence, it was born of loyalty, but the truth, it finds its way. You have done well to speak now. Mrs. Winthrop, her sharp features softened by reflection, added, I was wrong to push Reginald about the manuscripts. I thought I was helping, but I see now I only added to his burden. Mr. Baxter and Dr. Price nodded in agreement, their own regrets unspoken but evident. Inspector Grange, entering the room, clapped Poirot on the shoulder. You've a knack for this, Poirot. Grayson's in custody and the case is airtight. I'll see you get the credit you deserve. Poirot waved a hand dismissively. Credit, Inspector, is for those who seek it. I seek only the truth and the order it brings. As the guests began to depart, their farewells subdued, Hastings followed Poirot to the terrace, where the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. You were right, Poirot, Hastings said. There was more to it, not another killer, but the echoes of everyone's actions. They all played a part, didn't they? Poirot nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Oui, mon ami. A crime, it is never one act, but a chorus of choices, of silences, of secrets. The little grey cells, they hear the echoes, and they guide us to understanding. Now, let us leave Latchwood to its healing and return to the world beyond. As they walked toward the waiting car, the manor loomed behind them, its ancient walls a silent testament to the truths uncovered and the wounds that would slowly mend. Hastings felt a pang of melancholy, but also a quiet pride in his friend's unrelenting pursuit of justice. Chapter 15. The Final Farewell. The morning of departure at Latchwood Manor was cloaked in a gentle mist, as though the estate itself sought to soften the sharp edges of the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. The sun, struggling to break through, cast a pale glow over the ivy-clad facade, illuminating the ancient oaks and the rose garden where secrets had first begun to unravel. The guests, their bags packed and their farewells subdued, moved through the grand hall with the air of those eager to leave behind the shadows of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder. Hercule Poirot, his small figure immaculate in a tailored suit, stood by the front door, his patent leather shoes gleaming and his moustache waxed to perfection. Yet, his green eyes held a quiet melancholy, as though the weight of the case lingered in his mind. Captain Hastings, standing beside his friend, adjusted his hat and glanced at the manor one last time. Deception. Yet Hastings sensed that his friend was reflecting on something deeper, a final lesson from Latchwood's tragedy. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low as they stepped onto the gravel drive, "you've solved another impossible case. Grayson's motive, the Codex Aureus, the planted clues. It's all so brilliantly clear now. But you seem pensive. Is there something you haven't shared?" Poirot paused, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on the mist-shrouded gardens. "Mon ami, the case, it is solved, oui. The truth has been laid bare. Grayson killed Sir Reginald, wounded by a master's distrust and driven by a desperate need to protect his past. The clues, the torn page, the missing quill, the letter of dismissal, they led us to him. Yet there is always a final reflection, Hastings. A moment to consider not just the crime, but the human soul that shaped it." Hastings nodded, his thoughts turning to the guests they were leaving behind. "They're all changed by this, aren't they? Lady Evelyn, Violet, even Mrs. Winthrop and Baxter. They'll carry this with them forever." "Précisément," Poirot said, his voice soft but resonant. "A crime, it is not just an act, but a ripple that touches all who stand near. Lady Evelyn, she grieves not only for her husband, but for the trust she lost in those closest to her. Mademoiselle Cresswell, her youth is now shadowed by the knowledge of betrayal. Mrs. Winthrop, her pragmatism blinded her to the pain she caused. Mr. Baxter, his ambition stirred suspicions he could not control. And Dr. Price, his curiosity made him a pawn in a game he did not understand. Each, in their way, contributed to the tragedy, though only Grayson wielded the fatal blow." They began to walk toward the waiting car, the crunch of gravel underfoot a steady counterpoint to Poirot's words. The manor loomed behind them, its windows reflecting the pale light like watchful eyes. "And Grayson," Hastings said, "he served Sir Reginald for 30 years, only to betray him. It's almost unimaginable." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile softening his features. "The heart, mon ami, it is a paradox. It can be loyal for decades, yet turn in a moment of despair. Grayson's betrayal, it was not born of malice, but of a wound too deep to bear. Sir Reginald's letter accusing him of disloyalty was the spark that ignited his rage. And Major Fielding's confession, it was a shield, an act of honor to protect a man bound to him by a shared past. These are the truths that linger, Hastings, the truths of the human heart." As they reached the car, Lady Evelyn and Miss Violet Cresswell emerged from the manor, their faces pale. "Latchwood will never be the same, but we will rebuild, for Reginald's sake. The Codex Aureus will stay with us, a reminder of his legacy, and of the lessons we've learned." Poirot inclined his head, his expression one of gentle respect. "Madame, the Codex, it is more than a treasure. It is a symbol of endurance. You and Mademoiselle Cresswell, you will carry Latchwood forward, and its wounds will heal in time." Violet, her auburn hair framing her face, added softly, "I was afraid to speak of what I saw that night, Monsieur Poirot. But you showed me that truth, even when it hurts, is the only way forward. Thank you." Poirot's eyes twinkled with warmth. "Mademoiselle, courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. You have shown great courage." As Lady Evelyn and Violet returned to the manor, Inspector Grange approached, his stocky figure silhouetted against the mist. "Poirot,"
he said, clapping a hand on the detective's shoulder. "You've made my job look easy. Grayson's in Exeter, and the case is solid. I'll make sure the Yard knows of your work." Poirot waved a hand dismissively. "The credit, Inspector. It is for those who seek it. I seek only the truth, and the order it brings. But I thank you for your assistance. Your men, they were most thorough." Grange grinned, a rare break in his gruff demeanor. "And you're a sly one, Poirot. That business with the Codex and the invisible ink, I'd never have thought of it." As Grange returned to his duties, Poirot and Hastings climbed into the car, the driver closing the door with a soft thud. The manor receded as they drove down the tree-lined avenue, its towers and turrets fading into the mist. Hastings leaned back, his mind replaying the case, the scream, the library, the web of clues that Poirot had so masterfully untangled. "You know, Poirot," he said, "this case felt different. It wasn't just about the murder, but about the people, their secrets, their regrets. You saw it all, didn't you?" Poirot's smile was wistful, his gaze fixed on the passing countryside. "Oui, mon ami, a crime, it is a mirror, reflecting the souls of those it touches. At Latchwood we saw pride, loyalty, betrayal, and redemption. The little grey cells, they solve the puzzle. But the heart, it understands the story. And that, Hastings, is what we carry with us." The car sped toward the station, the world beyond Latchwood opening before them. Hastings felt a quiet pride in his friend's genius, but also a deeper understanding of the man beside him. A man who saw not just the crime, but the humanity behind it. As the manor vanished from view, its secrets laid bare, Poirot leaned back, his eyes closing briefly, a contented sigh escaping his lips.
Adieu, the weight of the case lifting as the car carried them away. Latchwood Manor, with its faded grandeur and hidden truths, would remain a memory, a testament to the brilliance of Hercule Poirot and the enduring power of the human heart to reveal and redeem its deepest secrets.